I will assume that I sit here.
If you want, sit right here.
All right.
We're very cozy and conversational here at Astronomicon.
I hope so, because I haven't been told to do anything else but walk on stage when I hear my name.
And mission accomplished.
I didn't do that.
Tell me about this. So how are you enjoying Astronomicon? Do you do a lot of conventions these days? I know we had you at Chronicon a few months ago, if anybody was there.
Well, I'm a stoner, so I probably do.
Oh, you like marijuana? I didn't know that.
It's a bit about remembering. Yeah, how do you like this place? Have you been here before? Probably. But, you know, and with me, it's a double-edged sword now, because I'm not only a stoner, but I'm an old stoner. And so that's a double negative.
We're double positive, because that also makes you an OG. Okay.
No, that's other people looking at you. See, in other people's eyes, I'm cool. But when you look from my end, I can barely hear anybody, and I can barely see anybody, and so I'm just enjoying what time I have left, and being out in the public with my fans. By the way, it's like being with my family.
And you have 6 kids, is that right?
So it's last count.
Plus everyone here.
Six that I know of, you know. No, I'm quite sure if I had any more, I would have heard more. Yeah, I've got 6, and I got 6 grandchildren too. And I got a little a niece that's going to be killing it in show business. She's my son. Oh, my son's here, but he's at the gym, I think. He doesn't like my.
I have a panel. I'll be the gym.
I've signed stuff after the show, and people kept bringing me homemade bongs that they made, you know, and Chong bongs. And so I'd sign them, and then my wife, who is really the business brains of the family, she said, "We got to make our own bongs." And then she said, "That would be a perfect job for our son, Paris." And so Paris started a bong company, Chong Bongs, and we were doing okay, but we never really made it big until the U.S. government put an undercover agent in. So the government, they went after the bong companies, and they went after me especially. And so they wanted to make sure, that with all that billions of dollars wasn't, just disappearing. So they put a government agent, a businessman, into our bong company, and found out that we were losing money like crazy. My son never had any business experience, and so this undercover agent put our business together, showed us how to make money, and we were doing good, man. Everything was great until the DEA wanted to put me, close the bong. Well, they actually wanted to get me and put me in jail. It was when Bush was doing the Iraqi war. And they were looking for some kind of distraction, some hippie thing. The hippies created a disturbance during the Vietnam War. And so with the Iraqi war, they needed some kind of diversion. And so they went after the bong company. And they went after Tommy Chong because he owns Chong Bongs. And so the cops gave me an offer, or the government gave me an offer I couldn't refuse. They said, if you don't plead guilty, we're going to go after your son and your wife. Well, my son, I didn't care. He could go to jail. That's no problem there. It's like going to college, But my wife, I just couldn't envision me visiting her on visiting days. How are they treating you, honey? No, that wasn't going to work. And so I said, of course I'll plead guilty. I'll protect it. But I wasn't afraid of jail. In fact, it was the opposite. I was eager to go to jail because growing up in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and I realized the girls liked this. And so my brother was a jock, and he became a jock. I became like a wannabe Pachuco, which is like a Chicano zoot suit. Back in the day, they had ducktails, and they were the badasses because a lot of them never went to war, the Second World War, and so when the GIs came home, they saw those long-haired zoot suiters with all the girls, and so they created a little war there. So I was really on the zoot suit side, and so, and I had a biker give me my first tattoo when I was 15. And
don't clap for that tattoo yet.
It was a homemade tattoo. He was covered with tattoos, and so he gave me a tattoo. And years later, I was on a radio show with another biker, and he looked over. He goes, "Hey, Chong, that's a white supremacy tattoo." And I'm Chong, married to a black woman. I'm wearing a white supremacy tattoo. And it is, it's an ego. And so when I found that out, I was going to get it changed. And my son, Paris, he goes, "No, Dad, that's OG. Don't touch that. That's art. Don't mess with art." So anyway, I had friends who did, like this one, he was my best friend. Well, he went to jail for joyriding. That was what they called car theft back in the day. Yeah, Canadian. It was joyriding. And so he went to jail for 2 years. And when he got out, man, he looked like a movie star. Had his hair all in the face, and he was buff from working out, tan, looking great, man. And so secretly I said, yeah, I wouldn't mind going away for that. And I was lousy at school. And so I ended up dropping out of school after trying really hard to get my grade 12, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't get past algebra. And so I ended up running with the rough crowd, ended up going to jail for joyriding, although another friend of mine stole the car, stalled it, called me up. We're both trying to get the car started again. The cops pull up behind us. We go running into my house through the freshly fallen snow. So the cops just followed our tracks. They pulled us out of the bed, which we were in bed with our clothes on, and took me to jail. And then the next day, I went in front of a magistrate, got fined $100 for joyriding, and ended up. And that's when I got a social conscience. Because when I was in jail, there's people in there, but a lot of young guys, like myself. And I started thinking, the reason I'm in there is because there was really nothing for teenagers to do. Like a Hollywood movie, Footloose. They had nothing for teenagers to do. And so I talked to the magistrate. That's the way I am. I went and knocked on his door in his office, and I told him, the reason we get in trouble is that there's nothing for us to do. And the magistrate said, "Well, do something." And he said, "Yeah, if you know the problem, go fix it." And I had another friend whose dad was one of the operators of the Boys Club of America. And so we started the Shades Teen Club in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. And because we had the Boys Club behind us, we got possession of the biggest dance hall in Calgary, Alberta, right on the main drag. Every Saturday, it was like a donated to us. And I had the first black R&B band in Calgary. And so we packed that sucker, man. And made a ton of money. But the only problem was they made us quit at 11:30 because of the liquor law license, the Sunday church law. And so at about 12 midnight, we'd make it to 12 midnight, there would be all these rock and roll enthusiasts, thugs, on the street in Calgary with nowhere to go. And so they'd find out somebody would be babysitting or something, and party over here. And we started making big headlines of home invasions, and all this horrible, fights, and fights would break out because of underage drinking, all of that stuff. And so I got called into the mayor's office, the mayor of Calgary, Alberta. And the chief of police was there, and the city attorney. And they said, because he knew I had a legitimate teen club. And so they told me, you guys are going to get out of town during the Christmas holidays. And we said, all right. And so, yeah. And so we went to Vancouver, and that's really where I started my musical career, was in Vancouver. And it's been serendipity. Because I get asked a lot. It's hard to hear the questions and that. I'll just tell you, my biggest question is, how the hell did you do what you did? Like I said, I'm a high school dropout. When I was in prison, to finish the prison story, when I went to prison, I felt like I was going to college. I was getting some really good education, which I did. And by the way, when I was in prison, I tried to get my grade 12 because it was mandatory for prisoners that were young. With me, it wasn't mandatory, but it was a chance was there. And so I enrolled. In the 9 months I was there, I went to school. I tried to get my GED, and I failed. And the reason I failed is that I couldn't get past algebra. And so the teacher said, there in jail says, just write down anything and we'll pass you. And can you imagine how valuable GED it made in prison that you cheated? It was a good joke. And being a comedian, I just put it in my joke bag. Thanks, but no thanks. Because in prison, I learned, it wasn't college for me, by the way. And there's a documentary called AKA Chong, and it talks about my time in prison. And and it was really beneficial. I met a lot of really incredible people. I helped one guy write a bestseller and a movie. His name was Jordan Belford. He was the Wolf of Wall Street. And we were in prison together. We shared this. They put the celebrities together, by the way. And so
there's even a VIP in prison.
Oh, big time. In fact, they changed the rules because I started getting so many visitors. People in there, they heard that I was in there, so they would come to visit, people that they had not visited for a long time. They would come and to have pictures with me. And so the warden made a law saying that I couldn't take pictures with the visitors anymore, which I kind of broke the law because you can't turn down people, they've been traveling forever. There's one guy showed up with his son in a wheelchair, and how can I turn that guy down? And so I did the pictures, but I learned how to deal in prison. You tell on yourself right away, no matter what you've done, because if you tell on yourself, that means they don't have to go through they don't have to work. And so they like that, and they say, don't worry about it. And so I told on myself that I took pictures, and I got it. It's okay. No problem. But I was such a celebrity there because I'd been on a Dr. Dre album, rap album. And so I had all the black inmates coming around looking, hey, that's him. That's Chong. And so I had a fan base, and the prison hierarchy were fans. In fact, we shot a video in the prison, in the warden's office. And while we were shooting, we're setting up the camera, and I know the movie protocol is real simple. You know, you're shooting a movie, you yell quiet on the set. Everybody has to get quiet, and if they don't get quiet, then you yell at them. You know, and so I heard the warden walking around in the other room, and so I yelled, "Quiet on the set!" You know, their dealer, and so he's very intelligent, very straight, very nice. And so he fought the case and won. But the government, soldiers of the government, they turned around and refiled another charge. And he never had the money to do the defense. And so he got 14 years for being just the dealer, just the guy. And so he was in there, and because he was such a genius, he got a couple of university degrees while I was in prison. And so he ran a garden for the, what do you call it? For the charity, you know, for people, the homeless. The prisoners couldn't eat out of this garden, but we could because we were the gardeners of it. And so we had a private home-cooked meal every day, every night, with the best produce you could possibly have, because Eric was a genius grower, and then we could supplement with other connections that he had. So we had gourmet meals almost every night. So prison wasn't as bad as the movies want to make it to be. In fact, it was incredible for me. And then there was a skydiving team out in the desert that heard I was there. So every Sunday we'd get a show of skydivers over the prison, and it was incredible. And so, you know, so prison life wasn't bad. And then I joined the Native Sweat Lodge. If you just wanted to join a sweat lodge, because a sweat lodge in America is the official church of the indigenous people, the First Nations. And there's a law in America that mandates that every federal prison has to have an area for a sweat lodge. And so we had our own sweat lodge. We had our own Indian grounds, basically, because as we made the sweat lodge, we kind of enlarged on it because, hey, it was against, we're within the law. And the guards, if you're busy in prison with something to do, in fact, that's my advice. If you're going to go to prison, act as crazy as you can. Not to hurt anybody, but just really get weird. People respect weird. So you get left alone. There was a guy in there, he did a map of America with stones and certain things, you know, bush, desert stuff, you know. And so when we were there, we had the gardens, and then the head of the garden guy, the Japanese, Mr. Ono, he heard that I like making bongs, and so he found some clay for me, and so I made all these clay bongs.